Already got edited. You know this.
I feel like I've either been at an, I feel like I've been at an advocacy day with you.
Somewhere, because you look familiar too.
Either co-directors or TNJ. Do you know treatment at jail?
It's working?
The treatment at jail campaign?
She's done a lot of stuff before PTS. She's done a lot of stuff like dialysis and stuff.
Oh, you in an ambulance?
So yeah, you do look, that's why when I saw you, I was
I used to work at NAMI NYC, like the mental health work.
all of the other events, that's kind of alright.
I just like a couple months ago just switched. I've been there for 3 years and some change. I used to work with Jordan and community access on stuff.
Community access, that's what I know you from.
Yeah, but I've never been there.
And also it's
So what I mentioned, like I can be,
But like I organize is what I'm saying. Sometimes we organize together. I feel like that's where I've seen you is at a rally.
Because I went to all the community access, I was the only one in my building who went to all the trips, everything.
Okay. Yeah.
The only one out of 45 people. I used to always be out and about, especially walking, but I can't do that no more. I can't walk 100+ blocks like I used to.
It happens.
But otherwise, I was walking all over the place. I used to walk all the way to the Bronx and back to H. I know that, but it wasn't nothing for me. But I can't do it now.
Yeah. But at least it's still here, you know?
But as far as, but before I fractured it, I was still going to all every event they had. I went to all the Albany, all of that. I went to all that stuff.
That's probably where I
Because I'm been told since I was a child. Now at my age and my disability, I'm watching TV like I never did in my whole life. When I was young, I wasn't watching TV. I was always out.
Yeah.
And I got a job as soon as I turned 14. So I wasn't never home and sitting and watching TV, but that's what I'm doing at 57. Because I had no choice. And I never expected that either. People was telling me, you never seen that show? I said, no, because I wasn't watching TV. I was out doing things, walking, whatever, not just sitting home watching TV. Oh, I was about to say that's a doorbell.
It's like, are we in an apartment? We got a couple minutes.
Your hair's still looking good. I still love your hair. I always did. The first time I met you.
It was much longer before. Hey, it was much longer before.
I know. I know. Look, see, the picture right there shows it. I remember when you said it was long. Was you ever at the Vista Center?
I've never gone, but I refer people there.
Okay. If I would have known about that place, my building, they didn't tell us nothing. They didn't tell us nothing. I would have gone to that Vista Center all the time. But when I finally heard about it, I loved it.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yes, that place.
Oh.
All right, phones on silent, I guess.
Mine is off.
I'll start at 4.
Wait, you said I'll start at 4. Oh. No. Oh wait. I have water, so I like water, but it's too late.
No, it's not.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just if I have one as well.
That was the last one. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
You still have
Here, I can waterfall it.
It should last you the 2 hours. Like,
My mouth is like super dry, so it's like the Gatorade helps a little bit.
Gatorade helps you dry.
All right. Hi, everyone. Should I stand?
No, you're good.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mia Felton, the Fellowship and Public Programs Coordinator at Apex Art, and I'm thrilled to be with all of you for today's panel. This program is linked to our current New York City exhibition. Welcome Home is an Apex Art New York City open call exhibition on view here until July 27th. The exhibition interrogates the revolving door between mass incarceration and homelessness in Black American communities. In a moment, I'll be introducing you to the panelists, but first, a little about Apex. For those of you new to Apex Art, we are a nonprofit arts organization with exhibitions and public programs taking place in New York City and internationally. This exhibition was selected through our unique, democratic, biannual open call process. Our jury takes the decision-making out of our hands and instead allows our engaged global audience to select our exhibitions. If you are interested in becoming a juror, you can send us an email at juror@apexart.org. I would like to acknowledge the work of our wonderful Apex Art team, Ryan Soper, Lisa Vagnoni, Ash Hagerstrand, and Apex Art founder and executive director Stephen Rand. We are live streaming this program. The recording will be posted on the event page on our website. For those watching the live stream, we will be dropping links into the chat, some of which will let you dive deeper into this compelling exhibition. And if you would like to use closed captions, you can click the CC at the bottom of your screen. This is our 7th public program in conjunction with Welcome Home, so please check the exhibition page on our website for upcoming events. Follow us to keep an eye on our future activities, and pop into Apex if you can. And now I'd like to introduce the panelists. Felix Guzman is a poet, community organizer, and advocate of human integrity and dignity. A compassionate abolitionist at heart, he believes in the possibility of redemption. Urging for the intentional building of healthy and inclusive communities, Felix uses poetry to spotlight the importance of language, resources, and equity to effect successful reentry and community engagement. Born in 1945 of Puerto Rican blood and raised in the streets of Harlem, Luis Quiros has fought against the marginalization of himself and others as a scholar, activist, community organizer, social commentator, educator, and author. Luis pursues the right to education, speaking and validating the aims of the otherized. Kimberly Blair, MPH, is a queer Black Latina on a mission to support the liberation of all oppressed people. She currently serves as the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at a Brooklyn-based nonprofit. Recognized by City and State New York, Kimberly works as a policy strategist, a reproductive justice organizer, and as a mental health advocate and peer. She is a graduate of Georgetown University and Boston University School of Public Health and is currently training with Ancient Song, Inc. to become a full-spectrum diva. Not diva, oh my God.
I am a diva.
A full-spectrum doula. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nia. And welcome all to this beautiful panel curated today by Apex Art. We are so thrilled to be here. So without further ado, you already got the bios. So let's just level set a little bit and set some community guidelines to make sure that we are making a safe and inclusive space here. So while we strive for a safe space, we know that the topics today might be a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit triggering, especially for those who share some of the lived experiences that will be mentioned today. We ask you to take care of yourself, practice grounding activities, take breaks if needed, while also respecting the quiet space. We also encourage all folks to use I sentences. So when asking questions or even with the panelists, right? We don't want to make broad overgeneralizations. We want to make sure that when we're speaking from lived experience, we are truly doing that by using I statements. The next community guideline I have here for you all is to use person first or person centered language, especially when asking questions of the panelists. So show of hands here. I know those who are live stream can't see it. How many of you know what person first or person centered language means? Okay, so actually not too many. This is what you came here for, right? We're already learning from jump. So person first or person centered language is language that does what is in the definition. It centers the individual before any diagnoses, before any systems of oppression that have been attributed to them. So, for example, when we talk about mental health conditions, we say she has bipolar versus she is bipolar. When we talk about the carceral system and maybe someone who is impacted by it, we can say that, he went to prison or experienced prison, but not necessarily calling someone very harsh words such as inmate or things that have been traditionally used to oppress us, okay? So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, but we're gonna keep going and make sure that we are also challenging ourselves to be a little more inclusive. Finally, all lived experiences here are welcomed in this space. They're being shared for educational purposes and to foster constructive dialogues among all of us and for those watching on live stream. We are also trying to inform and open all gates towards future advocacy. As you will find out, a lot of our lived experiences are what stem and spur us into advocacy today. With that being said, personal details or accounts of an individual's journey should remain in this space. So we might have some panelists or myself, the moderator, share some very detailed experiences. The idea is that the concepts learned here should be disseminated, should be widespread. But specific details of traumatic instances or lived experiences should not necessarily be the crux of what you go out and share. And so now that we have set these guidelines, I want to just open it up to make sure that there are no more guidelines that would make you all feel comfortable in this space before we proceed with the questions. Anyone? Okay, let's get started. So we have here some questions curated. Obviously, we have here that the topic at hand today is the intersectionality of poverty and how to go through it. When we were curating our questions, some things that came up that we want you all to take away today are to deconstruct the definition of poverty, including to understand and unpack the root causes and pathways to poverty and the insurmountable odds of escaping it. We're also trying to make sure that some takeaways today are to discuss the lived experiences navigating through poverty that can be the impetus towards future commitment towards advocacy and organizing. And finally, our panelists want you to learn today what is artivism and how can that serve you as a method of healing justice. So our first question, and it could go for any panelist, many of our present day experiences begin with the stories of our ancestors, right? Or those who came before us. How does your ancestral lineage tie into your present day lived experience and how you were born into advocacy? Luis?
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you all for being present and those that I cannot see out there in the world. I would first like to start by working on some words. You will see throughout the evening that I will be working on some words. When we use the word intersectionality as it relates to me, LQ, Luis Quiros, I'm also referring to my intersectionality between the streets, advocacy, scholarship, the academics, law. I am defined by hybridity of relationships. I'm not just defined academically because I happen to have a lot of degrees or because I happen to teach at a university. I don't want to be, and because I grew up in Harlem, and to me, my most favorite experiences have been the streets, something that I think most kids, too many kids, don't have enough of today. That because I enjoy the streets, I also do not want to be considered solely streetwise, even though I love that degree more than my academic degrees. To answer your question now, so I will be working on words as we go along. So to answer your question, you notice that I was introduced by 1945. I usually don't go around saying 1945 because I know I don't look it to begin with, but I say it also in order to give you uh, an immediate response, an elbow to let you know this man up front was born at a time when civil rights legislation was not even in order. Before the Brown case, at a time when in Harlem there were stores I could not get into, in times in Harlem where I was asked to leave the counter and I couldn't eat there, in times where in swimming pools I would go, and in Palisades Amusement Park, which had them, and they would have a brown bag there, the brown bag theory that if you're darker than a brown bag, you will not swim in the swimming pool. And that is an immediate response to your question. My mother I have parents, Puerto Rican and Venezuelan. My heritage and my definition is more the Puerto Rican side because my mother ate my father up alive and we were all Puerto Rican. He didn't count. He said, tú eres puertorriqueño, and I wasn't going to argue that. I also lived in Puerto Rico, and I also went there often. What's interesting about this, my father, who came from Caracas, Venezuela, and I am 50% Venezuelan too. What's interesting about the Venezuelan side that my father and let me start with my grandfather. He was highly educated. He was a doctorate, a PhD in sociology and the law. And he was assassinated and killed in Caracas because he represented people in law. So that history, to have a grandfather, where I now have a son who also has a PhD in that category, is pretty impressive. But it also indoctrinated me to a word and a leader that very few people ever heard of. When we speak about our forefathers, they ain't my forefathers. It could be yours. You accept them if you want them. They're not my forefathers. To me, they were authors. And you can't be my forefather if you deny me my right to speak and to show my flag, which they did in Puerto Rico. However, that's for another question later on. For the Venezuelan side, Simón Bolívar was often spoken to me through my grandmother and my father. And they advocated and they spoke to him as and I've read his stories ever since. I know a lot about that man. And I have come to assimilate, connect, love, and theorize over the ideas and the idealism of Simón Bolívar. So for me, he is my George Washington. For you, you pick your own. Thank you.
Hello, y'all. So, yes. So, I'm firstborn American of my family. So my family's from the Dominican Republic. My mother was the matriarch of her family in DR. She was raised the daughter of farm owners, like tobacco farm, and had animals and such. And my father, he had his family upbringing as well. When they came to America, they settled in Brooklyn, and my father was the traditional bodeguero. He was part of like the they had a grocery store and everything that came along with it, and what that meant. If you're Latino, Hispanic, kind of understand what that means. And for me, the legacy of my grandmother and my grandfather owning that tobacco farm, and kind of like being very rigid and very regimented and discipline heavy, meant that that I found my innocence actually being channeled through being in the books and video games growing up. So whereas I could say that I come from a legacy of like real traditional, like hardcore, like just working class, like pick yourself up from the bootstraps kind of vibe. And that's the mentality. My two oldest brothers are international finance. My little brother's a doctor, and I am going to change the world in my own right. So that's the legacy that I honor, is the legacy of all those poets and writers that came before me, that gave me the life that I have now, along with my family. So yeah, thank you.
I truly appreciate that. Thank you so much for contextualizing, where you're speaking from, where you came from, in terms of those that paved the way for you here. So both of you mentioned aspects of being first gen here in America, and also coming from working class backgrounds. I think, Felix, you just mentioned that. How did that, coming from a working class background, or even any experiences that you might have with poverty, well, actually, let's take a step back. How do you define poverty in your own terms? There are obviously some dictionary definitions we could look up right now, but I would love to know from your lived experience, how you define it, and also how that definition, how has that changed as you've navigated through different lived experiences?
Great question. And again, I'm going to work on words again, and I'm going to work on the word poverty. I can just come to the conclusion, make it simple, by saying that when you don't have choices, you're in some form of poverty. But then we have to examine what kind of choices are we talking about. Poverty, immediately for me, without dispute, is a condition that is intentional. It is an economic intention. The intentionality of that word is violent. There is no logical or unlogical reason why there should be any form of poverty, and I could say domestically, in the United States. And poverty, therefore, in the United States is intentional because it creates income and it otherizes people. I have written a book on what it is to be otherized. I have been otherized. And I was born as otherized because, as I mentioned, in 1945, well, my mother had to fill out forms for me in school, whatever the form was required. My category was confusing because I wasn't white. I wasn't the obvious black, even though there's not a Puerto Rican that can escape having black blood in them. They may look white, but let's take that DNA. And the aspect of that is it's a phenomenal difference. And so therefore you cannot have, let me not use a negative, to discuss poverty, you must discuss race. You must discuss a class. It is unavoidable. And there is no such thing as, when we talk about race in any topic, that it's a race. There is no such thing as a race card. People try throwing that at me, but unfortunately you can't throw that at somebody who's highly educated because they get burnt with that. There's no such thing as a slave card, a race card. It is racism. So I'll start with that and continue. You have any further questions? But certainly lack of choices. I also visited Cuba, and what a lot of people would say, there are poor people in Cuba. According to you, that they don't view themselves as poor. Neither did I. My parents view themselves as poor either. We were poor if you use the data, and data often lies.
So real quick, I was born with facial difference, right? I was born with a birth defect called hemifacial microsomia. So that meant there was some asymmetry to the vertical axis of my face, and I had some surgeries, corrective surgeries as a child. And so my framework for poverty is a lot different in the fact that I live within a microcosm within a microcosm within a microcosm of demographics that kind of get overlooked, right? You don't see people that look different. I might look more closer to symmetry now, but that was different when I was younger. So my trajectory to actually becoming incarcerated was as a result of not being able to find work, fast food, retail, hosting, waitering, greeting, jobs that if you just look even just cute, quote unquote, normal, or even if you were attractive, you could bounce around from job to job. I didn't have that. So in that regard, like even though I lived in the hood in America, I had no access to get the surgeries that I needed, due in part because of how poverty impacted my family, and therefore, coming from another country to come to America and then be forced to kind of like have to like try to navigate the social structures attached to like the neighborhood, new environment, new community, new country, and then having a child that needed extra help, and then kind of being devoured by that whole like the social service system attached to that, and how like everything attached to it just makes money and profit. And in that regard, like I didn't have the access to what people have, what children have now, right? And that just goes to show that like sometimes it's not even about like uh, the neighborhood, the color of your skin, and just the environment. Sometimes that you can't even affect how people treat you or view you based on the fact that for me, I look different when I was born, so I had a lot more against me. And in that regard, like poverty of like just basic basic necessities being met, right? People don't understand how like dental issues can create a lot of systemic endemic health issues within oneself, right? And then also how that will impact my schooling, like having to take months off of school to get surgeries done, and then still coming back up and getting 99.99 percentile in the nation in reading and math, right? And then that's the thing that people don't want to talk about is how like when just how far do you want poverty to be actually like reflected in the eyes of people you actually meet? And that's something that I want to actually bring up. Is like, it's all around us, and for me, I kind of can't close myself off to it. So for me, poverty is poverty is whatever doesn't allow someone to actualize the best potential. So yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you for grounding us in your own definitions of poverty. I'd actually like to just take it a step further and, go back to that question as to, well, if that's your definition of poverty, how has it changed throughout the years, especially Luis? You spoke a lot about the intersectionality with race and class and even immigration status. How has your definition, is that the same definition you have today that you had maybe in 1945, or were you I don't know, 1945, maybe I shouldn't be talking about the age
No,
right
I
now.
like it. I'm good. I'm good with 1945.
Yeah.
Still around.
Yeah, so tell me about how that definition for you has evolved.
The definition has made me as the seconds go by. Now it's seconds. It used to be months. Used to be years and then months. Now seconds. It has made me more committed to the cause of getting the world to understand that this world, that the social classes of the world, of even no matter which hemisphere, not until everybody in the world in the planet recognizes that everybody's an other, will our social conditions change. When we acknowledge that there is no one better than anybody else, that is when the boundaries will disappear. And what has motivated me is I have become much more vibrant, assertive, bold, risk-taking. I don't allude when I want to say something. I don't allude, I just say it. I get fired a lot, but it's okay. I accept it. So I want to respond to that by letting you know I do not tolerate it, even when there have been an X put on my back. I will not tolerate it, and hopefully that responds to how I was before, how I am now. And I'm worried about I'm not worried, I'm gonna love how I'm gonna be tomorrow.
I love that.
So yeah, I just wanted to clear something up. Poverty is a systems attached to what don't let a person become their best potential, right? So with that being said, right, like I was very timid and very reserved, even going as far back as last year, and then I realized that poverty as it relates to mental health and how Black and Brown mental health is actually addressed, right? Um, in that regard, like I realized that the mental health system doesn't work as it could and should for everyone. And in that regard, I realized that with depression setting in, no one's coming to save me. So, in moving away from being dependent upon like people giving me value and purpose and vision for myself, I realized that like no one's coming to save me, right? So I had to do it myself, and from last year to this year, it's a total change, and I'm just grateful for the journey because at the end of the day, I'm escaping the hood, that was always my purpose, and that was always my vision for myself is to actually transcend the hood and actually like get out of it and have passports like legacies that to create and also dreams to inspire and just be more than just the throwaway. The society kind of says that formerly incarcerated people are supposed to be or can be or are known to be, and just be more than that. Be a throwaway. Like I'm more than just a pitch person. I'm more than just like a fundraising person. I'm actually a human being that actually has purpose and value beyond the moment and the platform. Like it's not about like the conditions that I was born from, but actually where I'm going to be. So thank you.
No, thank you. And so, what's really intriguing to me as the panelists are speaking, this concept of systems keeps coming up, right? So some systems that were defined, Felix, you mentioned the healthcare system, you mentioned the carceral system. Earlier, Luis, you mentioned education system. You mentioned even the workforce, right? So in what ways did other existing systems in America intersect with and impact your experience navigating through poverty?
Okay. Thank you, Kimberly. Let's go back to pre-Brown case, and really, let's be real. Also, is after the Brown, because of the Brown case doesn't mean segregation stopped. That's nonsense. Still here. The public school system is broken up by zip code, and that is segregation. We all know what zip codes have the best high schools. So none of this is being equal. So what I'm going to say in reference to your question, Kimberly, is that born when I was one of the most furious, I didn't care what people called me. They could call me the N word, the S word. But one phrase I was thrown at me was something that I can't forget and echoes forever in my life, almost daily. And that was when white kids would beat me up. I lived there, Harlem, 125th Street, really walking distance from Columbia University. And on the west side, not the east side of Harlem, where Spanish Harlem was known as Spanish Harlem, I was born in White Harlem, 125th Street. And try to walk to a public school or a Catholic school from the white side of Columbia University and Riverside Church and Grant's Tomb, nevertheless, and a white neighborhood and a black grandfather and my skin color, etc. I was beat up and said by kids in a Catholic school who told me that God freed them and Lincoln freed me. Now, I don't celebrate Juneteenth. There's no way Juneteenth. It depresses me that Black people still say Juneteenth, let's celebrate. What's there to celebrate? We were born free, okay? And a political event is not going to free me. Neither is a holiday. And I'm sure that to answer your question, Kimberly, this country has no philosophy. Its philosophy is one of moreism, more of this, more of that, I'm better and better and better. When that is your philosophy and the only thing that works is Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest, what do you do with kids who have asthma? Well, I'm working with kids that have autism and serious autism, nonverbal. What do we do with Charles Darwin? So the survival of the fittest is not a philosophy; it's a declaration of war. And what our schools, our elementary schools, are required to have what they don't have. We don't have it because they're afraid of it. Just like in slavery, teaching was against the law. You cannot teach a Black person to read. We need to read to not thank white people for a freedom that was ours anyway to begin with. And we need to understand that unless these courses, you mentioned the word America, I'd like to refer to it with all due respect, the United States. Because Puerto Rico was also America for me, so my father was American without having to come here in Caracas. So what I want to say, in the United States, to be able to live as a human being with dignity, you have to resort to the international law, because the domestic law does not work for us. The Bill of Rights did not work. The Bill of Rights, women were not allowed to vote, so how can we be free? If the people that created people can't vote, what kind of country is this? Because this is not part of the philosophy. How do we say that our forefathers, whose forefathers? Forefathers can't give birth. What are we talking? We have to stop alluding. We have to understand and talk what reality is. Reality is that this country cannot be ruled by white men, and that's what it is now. And that's, and don't tell me, well, this guy's Black. That's even more racist. That's when they say, well, we didn't mean you. You're smart. We mean the other Puerto Ricans. And we all heard this. We all heard this kind of language and lingo. Don't buy it. Back to education. The way public education goes, you should write this down. Let me say, go slow. The way public school education goes, so will this country. This country is racist, so with public school education. The way the public schools go, zip codes, so does white people are concerned and scared of giving us the public education that we deserve. And that affects the penal system, the criminalization system. That affects how we interpret case law. That connects with the law that's coming out now with the Chevron case. Case law does not work. And how do we get judged by our peers when the lawyers that come against us get paid a lot more than the lawyer we can afford? So we lose that case unless we get more. I love Malcolm X, by the way.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah. So just to level set, because so much was said, and thank you so much, Luis. The question really is, in what ways did existing systems in the United States, such as the criminal legal system, such as shelter system, healthcare system, in what ways did those systems intersect with and impact your experience navigating through poverty? Felix?
Yeah, so in my neighborhood of Crown Heights, Brooklyn, right? It's at that point in time in the 80s and 90s, it was a Caribbean West Indian neighborhood, and there was a section, there still is, of Hasidic Orthodox Jews, I believe. I'm sorry, I get confused sometimes, but during the late 90s, there was a riot because there was an accident where a Hasidic gentleman had ran over a young black child, and then that occurred, that facilitated the Crown Heights riot, where a lot of the Hispanics and Latinos moved out of the neighborhoods to different enclaves throughout the city. So for me, how that experience kind of impacted my childhood was that I didn't grow up with that kind of impact of like Latinidad or nothing like that. I grew up in a framework of like always kind of like um, being like the mentality in the hood is always like the white man is the the root of all causes, like even like black on black crime and brown on brown crime and everything like that. So in that regard, like the mentality that I had to walk away and never come back. Like that was the mentality that I had, like escape the hood, never come back. And then as I navigated life and through the impact of like violence, gang violence, gun violence, and then like systemic, discrimination when I was trying to find work, and finding myself incarcerated, and then the systems attached to that. Like no one talks about like the really like the nonprofit industrial complex and how that keeps everyone, kind of isolated even furthermore. The shelter industrial complex and like how even like like even well-intentioned looking organizations and such are still at the root of the problem because everyone is benefiting from the problem and the solution, and then and the people who actually like lose everything are the people at the root of the whole issue that are really trying to get a grasp of some dignity, actually feeling like they're human. And in that regard, for me, I just want to bring it back now. So for me, all those systems attached, like, the social service system as a whole, human resources, social services, the shelters get paid by the Department of Social Services, Department of Corrections, Department of Education, everything is streamlined to a point like you just gotta kind of like put blinders on and just realize that like if you don't get out, like you can only save yourself, and because no one's coming to save you, and that's the reality of it. Like I learned that through understanding that for me, PTSD and depression, that's the real issue that I'm trying to run away from. That's the boogeyman that I'm trying to run away from, because really realistically, no one talks about that. No one talks about like the humanity at stake of people in these systems that are trapped, that are really just trying to desperately make it through. And then the moral injury that comes attached to that people kind of have to overlook and then normalize, and then just kind of like, I don't have the privilege of like just owning that for myself and kind of engaging in just forgetting that part of myself, my dignity, my humanity, because I don't want to just end up being like part of the same problem that benefits or either just overlooks and just walks away and says I'm not supposed to help somebody else. So I said a lot, but I hope I said something.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Something you just said, are that some of these systems, they benefit from both the problem and the solution. Let's start unpacking a little bit what some solutions or some alternative practices to solutions that are posed traditionally by our society, what those might be, right? So the next question is, what alternative practices and concepts can radically work towards helping others into their purpose, potential, and power, especially for individuals who are either currently experiencing poverty or have had in the past. Luis?
Yes, I want to again work on the word radically. There are different ways that we can uh, make movements and penetrate without other people seeing it as radical, because that's not their way. My way of being radical is okay. I'm comfortable with it. I love it. I embrace it. However, our I'm more interested in getting comrades involved in the system, and the way around it is it's a self reflection. What am I good at? To ask yourself, what am I good at? What we have a purpose in life, and believe me, your purpose in life is not to work. You were not born to
Say it again.
Okay.
I think some people didn't hear it in the back, Luis. Could you just repeat what you just said?
We were not born to work, and we were born to create a purpose, and that purpose comes through the self-reflection and development of a philosophy that's not in the classroom, because you're not going to get this philosophical teaching in a public school or even a Catholic school system, in an educational system. It has to be self-pursued. And then the way around all problems, and I'm usually not so much of an absolutist, if there's such a word, but I create words too. Absolute. And that became a word now. Okay, an absolutist is through art. Art will change everything. Use who you are and make it art. Like I talk to you, I talk at the university. I teach at Fordham University. Sometimes I give a course at a substitute at Columbia, whatever. I use my ways of speaking and not alluding and getting to the point in a classroom. That is my art. You all have your own art. Use it. Write it. The man on my left, who has the same birth date as I do, not the year, believe it or not.
Not 1945.
We're both born August 18th. So, he is an extraordinary artistic talent, and he writes. I'm talking to him on the phone. When I'm talking to him, I hear a little silence. Yeah, look what I just wrote. He comes out with poetry. He just wrote in 30 seconds that it's publishable. He uses that art. You all have an art to use. Use that art. It is the only way around. Graffiti is art. I used to think, oh, look at these guys that did graffiti. And I told my kids, when you're walking through Harlem or the inner city, look at the art, because that is more truthful than the history books you're reading in the classroom. That is art. Okay, so again, use your art. There's no other way. And art is who you are. You are art. You are art.
Thank you, Luis.
Oh, hello, y'all. So, thank you, Luis, for the shout out. So, I think first and foremost, we need to directly impact the lives of the cultural institutions that are in our neighborhoods, the artists, the educators, the healthy activists, and really start actually like spotlighting their journeys, and actually how to continue to successfully help them navigate those journeys and impact on the community. Because again, we want to make sure that people who actually have the vision for the community and actually impacting the world in a positive way, in the healthiest way possible, will actually get that without having to kind of, pitch to nonprofits, pitch to like foundations and fundraisers, and go through the whole rigmarole of like, 30-page, grant proposals and all that, and like actually look at who you really want to actually like align yourself with, and then work on trying to create like circular economies, different economies like that fund themselves, cooperative economies in neighborhoods, so that money's actually staying in there as opposed to kind of being funneled out. And also just realizing that we live in a world of excess, right? We live in, like, do we really need any more sneaker shops? Like, go jewelry shops. How many more, like, barber shops and nail salons do we need to have? Like, we need to actually, like, create, like, avenues for more entrepreneurship outside of, like, things that benefit off our excess. Because let's be real, like, is that money ever coming back into changing the neighborhood, or actually going to, like, building generation wealth for one family or whoever's family? Therefore, it never goes right back in. So regardless of, like, I think about social and moral obligation to make the world a kinder place. Because again, like, I worry about those that you know that are more developmentally impacted by, like, cognitive impairments, speech impairments, people that are very vulnerable, that require, like, caregiving, that require safety and such. Like, what are we doing how are we actually every moment of the day actually working to create a world that works on helping them actually achieve, like, 30, 40 years, decades of life? What is their quality of life? Do we really impact people by buying a gold chain? Like, how is that, like, responsible, ethical, like, when there's so much going on around us, and like, the world is collapsing around us? And, like, how can we actually, like, create sustainable legacy by helping empower someone else? Because let's face it, like, $1 to us might not mean something, but $1 to someone else might mean everything. It might mean the process of them, like, either throwing away their dignity and saying, I don't have $1, so I'm going to take $1. And that's the reality, that it is kind of survival of the fittest, dog eat dog for some people in the throes of poverty. And we have to actually look at it from a worldview perspective of, like, everyone can impact the world. Everyone, every moment of the day, can actually make a decision that can actually impact generational legacy or the world. Depending on, could it be for right, could it be for wrong? It's up to perspective and also personal interpretation. So again, like, to challenge and to change, the alternative is actually just approaching the world, or approaching having a worldview and a perspective that actually honors dignity and kindness, and actually, like, absolute, like, notion that redemption is possible.
Thank you so much, Felix. And so something that actually came up for both of you, not expect, was art. And I don't know if you staged that because we're in Apex Art, or if it just speaks to how holistic and healing art can be. So I think what I'd like for us to discuss next is this notion where art meets activism, right? And what does that look like? So what does artivism mean to you?
Art, to me, means, and I possibly should have said this at the beginning of this wonderful community forum here, is that if I'm elbowing you as I speak throughout the, let's go back to the first second. If I'm elbowing you as I'm speaking to you and I'm bumping into you, that is intentional. Art to me is, if I don't make you uncomfortable, I failed. I am intentionally here, and every second of the day, whether I'm with my kids or wherever I am, you will know that this is, stay away from this guy or talk to this guy all the time. You will not leave a neutral conversation with me. It will not, you will have a feeling about me, and your opinion of me will tell me how informed you are, because anybody can have an opinion, but tell me where your opinion goes, and I'll tell you how much of a, how much of a person, you really are. And so art to me, it has a responsibility to move. It has a responsibility, and it does not have the responsibility to tell you how, where, or what to think or where to move. It has the responsibility of movement. And from that movement, it's up to you to complete that picture. I can give, and I'm sure with this community here, that I can take this canvas here on my right or any canvas here and put it in front of a person who's an artist and understands the definition that I'm coming across with now, knows what's on that canvas. He or she sees something glorious in what other people may see a blank canvas. A non-artist looks at a canvas and then wants to be told, what do you want me to do? I want to go after the people that ask the question, what do you want me to do? They need work. You know, they need work, because that is where our problem comes, that we've created generations of people that do not know how to talk to each other. And I'm not talking because of COVID. They didn't know how to talk to each other before COVID. The problems that we have today, believe me, COVID did not invent them. You know, it's a great excuse because this country needs excuses, but this goes back a long time. Okay, and you know, during the Vietnam War, I would go into bars by Columbia, and we'd be drinking there. And one of the comedians, Carlson, was got his name. The famous comedian passed away from around Columbia. He used to go to the bar a lot, you know, give his jokes. In those days, we talked about social issues. You go to a bar today, people have no idea what we're talking about. It's about who we hitting on. Who, look at her or look at him or look at them or whatever you want to look at. But our problems, people are surprised by 9/11 because we haven't done the art. How do you avoid 9/11? How could there not be a 9/11 with how we treat the rest of the world? I want the person that looks at that canvas, Kimberly, and says, what do you mean to write on it? You know, where you been your whole life?
Thank you.
Hello, so, okay.
What does artivism mean to you?
Artivism, for me personally, I write now independent of any movements or anything. I write for myself. I say that because artivism means you don't throw people away, you know, and artivism and activism, sometimes people are media darlings and sometimes they're not. And for that reason, I say that, like, if you're an artist, you know, like that is your identity in life, right? If you're an activist, that is your identity in life. If you're an artivist, that is your identity in life, independent of any identity that people want to throw on you. So with that being said, like, you know, my writing comes from a place of like personal experience. You know, my writing comes from a place of like, you know, survivorship. It comes from a place of like not having nothing, not having faith, not having hope, not having anything but this, you know, desire to just like tell my story, right? And transcend all that and survive out of spite. So for me, artivism means actually holding on to your integrity despite however the world might treat you, however movements might treat you, however campaigns might treat you, however anyone might treat you, and still holding on to your integrity of your art, and then figuring out whether you want to monetize it or actually share it independent of anything. So in that way, you can have creative control of your vision. So for me, artivism means creative control of my vision, my writing, my identity, and also holding tight to the notion that, you know, I'm not getting pennies on the trauma that I experience for to elevate someone else to profit off of me in that regard. You know, so artivism, I gladly give of myself to the world because I feel that I have a moral and social obligation to do so. So, you know, like I am not a professional activist. I do not have, you know, thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands being funneled into my pocket. I'm independent of any notion that I have to align myself with any other movement or campaign or identity that anyone throws on me. So for that reason, I say that artivism to me means a purity of integrity and also understanding that like you can change the world if you're provided the platform to do so, independent of how anyone offers it to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for defining artivism. Did you want to add something?
No.
So you defined artivism and what it means to you both, right? Now, Luis, you mentioned earlier that art itself is movement, right? And right now you mentioned, Felix, that art for you is that purity, that integrity of, kind of in a way defining yourself outside of set movement systems that we historically might attribute as activism, right? So, with these kind of different perspectives on artivism, what does artivism mean when it comes to the collective fight towards emancipation and abolition? Especially when we're thinking about poverty, back to the root of this discussion.
Remember earlier I said that to discuss poverty, you cannot dodge the word race. It's part of it. Being poor in race and class in a society such as the United States, it's a mandate. Otherwise, it doesn't function. So they think it can function. It actually would function a lot better. The word abolition, which you mentioned, right?
Yes, abolition and emancipation.
Right. Abolition is an ideal. It's idealism. It's an ideal that we'd like to get to where we don't, where it's a target that we want to get to. It's an objective, abolition. However, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens in pieces. It happens in little movements. And so therefore, we need to organize in methods that people, first of all, and I'm so glad, Kimberly, that you added the word emancipation. Emancipation can only start with the self. I cannot emancipate anybody in this room or anybody listening. People have to emancipate themselves. And if they're waiting for the government to emancipate them, they'll never be emancipated. Governments do not emancipate people. What they do is give legal rights that you can do this and you can't do this, and somebody else can do this and somebody else can't do that. That is not emancipation, that is permission or non-permission. Emancipation starts with yourself. Please, I beg you, emancipate yourself. Emancipate yourself. And that is a hard task within an educational system that doesn't allow you to do it because you got to keep working. We live in a society, same topic. I'm not changing the topic. I'm not changing conditions. I'm not going through anything where there is no leisure time. That is intentional, that there is no leisure time in this society because leisure time allows you to sit with your family, to read, to get better, and to have discussions. I can de-emancipate anybody by keeping you busy. Keeping you busy is what is a goal of this country. Keeping you busy. It started with slavery. It started with the first Black person that came here. So emancipation and abolition, they're all highly connected. You cannot dodge race, poverty, and emancipation starts and ends only with yourself. And once you believe how important it is to be self-emancipated, don't forget Mandela was in prison for 20 years and said he was never emancipated. It was the people that put him in prison that were in prison. You know, my second book is Justice Unplugged. Unplug yourself. Unplug yourself. Because you're all plugged into, you're all robotic. And now with AI coming, please emancipate yourself. And you will generate an emancipation for others because people will read you.
So I just have a quick follow-up for Luis. So when you talk about, we need to work on emancipating ourselves, I'm assuming you mean from the structures that we have, mentioned throughout this discussion. And you also mentioned that part of the method of reaching that goal of emancipation is having that leisure time. Do you define art as part of that?
You need
As
leisure.
part of that leisure
no,
time.
you need leisure time to create the art, because otherwise you're too busy to think about it. You're not too busy. If I ask anybody what they spoke to about last night with their kids or people around the table, we don't have dinners anymore with people sitting. Benjamin Franklin started like the concept of leisure time, but killing it by saying money begets money. When you start selling that money makes money, I am sick of the United States story, the United States story of the person, the European that came here without money, came here with 5 cents, and with 5 cents, look what they build. They these stories are a dime a dozen, and they don't work. But let's not forget what Henry Ford said. Henry Ford said he was happier as a mechanic than he was in owning Ford. Rockefeller, the care of billions can kill you. We're not using the philosophical core of what it is to be emancipated. To be emancipated means that something that's simple, you can read and you will read and you will read and you will keep reading about philosophers, not one night, not Charles Darwin. You will read about this, you will read about that. You will read why so many things happen. Emancipation is having the time to read, which will allow you to do your art. Oh, this is who I am. I will use, I'm really good at this. I think I could make a difference with what I'm good at.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to level set, the question again, we were talking about artivism. You defined it, right? And, throughout this conversation, both of you have mentioned how art has been an alternative practice towards healing. And so I want to just delve a little further on how artivism can, spur that collective fight towards emancipation and
Yes.
abolition.
Thank you. I haven't had my coffee, so thank you, Kim, for repeating. When we talk about emancipation, we talk about abolition. We also have to talk about collective community accountability and community safety and what goes along with that. For me, at least personally, that's my philosophy. When I talk about abolition, I talk about a framework of rational abolition. And that's how I deem it. So we have to talk about like how do we honor the most vulnerable in the communities that deserve safety, protection, being honored, and not having their dignity impacted, right? And then we have to weigh that against like the collective freedoms and such. And I know that for me myself, had I had some interventions in my childhood, I would have gotten the help to address undiagnosed neurodivergence, right? Which would have allowed me to understand social concepts and social relationships and be more mindful to have discernment. And then with that being said, how that impacts emancipation, abolition, we have to take into consideration that, a person has to have the understanding, the knowledge, the informed perspective, and even in different circles, we would say informed consent, right? To be able to decide for themselves what they want to sign on to or what they want to ascribe to. So for me, my artivism actually is rooted in and steeped in actually honoring dignity, like honoring dignity of the most vulnerable who is desperately just trying to make it through the day without having been impacted by whatever it is that might happen. A person who doesn't have a sense of danger, right? Or who might be naive or gullible, or who might not know the ways of, like people that are, people that might have some predatory kind of, underpinnings to their actions, right? How do we actually honor them and protect them and actually help them reach their potential? So my artivism is about how the world doesn't honor the wallflowers, right? How the world doesn't doesn't make allowances for someone to go unimpacted by trauma. And so my artivism is about a collective call to actually make the world kinder, right? To remove away the structures attached to like materialism, money, the concept of money, the attachment to money, the social structures around money, and then just also understanding that like outside of money, there's still collective community possible. You know, there's still possibilities for like whole economies to be rooted around like, you know, one person does gardening, then we eat from that, then, you know, we live in a house together, and, you know, community actually like living, as opposed to this whole like, you know, capitalist consuming thing, like this consumption culture of like, I gotta have, I gotta have, I gotta have. Like, I made a commitment to myself of, you know, commitment to nonviolence, right? I made a commitment to assure that, you know, ethical consumption of, you know, ethical spending of my dollars, to see that, you know, I can try to impact the world somehow with my money, right? I'm not gonna go spend, you know, money to buy coffee, right? You know, coffee is coffee for me. You know, I want to be able to kind of create a circular economy around my art, so that whatever I do, whether it have a price of you know, MSRP, or whether it be an honor system of pay it whatever you can afford or pay it forward, I would love to for people to understand that like, money is not what I'm about. That is not the kind of social economy I want around my art. You know, I want to have it so that, you know, if someone could benefit from having a trip to another country, right? Then, you know, how about we just fund that trip through collective fundraising, through, you know, doing some free shows, or, you know, or honoring that, or actually calling on like um, people that are successful from the communities that we come from to actually invest in the communities and not just continue to profit off of us by showing this, you know, we're from Brooklyn, we're from New York City or whatever, but really like, how much money do you need? Like, how much generational wealth do you need before you actually impact the person that's actually starving on the street, you know? And maybe that might be offensive to some, that, you know, that's just me, you know, coming from, you know, church cheese, you know, government cheese, church turkeys, and actually like seeing my mother pray and like get on her knees and pray to God, you know, and, you know, light candles at the church and like, you know, and all that. And then realizing like the world that I grew up in from my childhood to now, like, you know, like I understand now why she used to pray. I understand now. I understand now, like the concept of like, you know, like not knowing if your kids are gonna come home, or if you're gonna come home, and realizing like the world is not safe. And how do we make it safe for others? And that's what my art is trying to do, is actually explore the concept of safety and actually call to action. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be about consumption. It can actually be about community and collective community at that. So yeah.
Well, thank you both. I've learned so much. And just because I'm actually gonna inspire some movement here, okay? We're actually going to open up the floor for questions from the audience, but I want you to, if it's possible, to get up, come and ask your question, so that folks on the live stream can see you. If you're not comfortable, then I will repeat it. But yeah, I want to make sure that we are not just sitting in our chairs for now. We're pondering upon all these great existential things that are being discussed. You know, we want to make sure that you yourself have an opportunity to feel engaged and learn with us. So, also for those of you who are on the live stream, I've been checking the chat throughout the discussion. So feel free to ask any of your questions in the chat as well. So yeah, do we have any questions for the lovely panelists? Come on.
I'll ask the question.
Awesome. Come up. Say your first name and then your question.
Okay, thank you both for being here this evening, this Saturday. Thank you to the crowd as well. My question is, yes, we can have theories and ideas, but from a tangible perspective, how does someone grow out of poverty?
Thank you. All right, so which one of you wants to take that on?
You can take it turns. I'll go first. So, growing out of poverty, again, starts with yourself and understanding the difference between wants and needs. Those are two words that we use a lot. There's a difference between something that you want, and something that you need. Once you start understanding that, you start from there. Once you start understanding the real difference, you start facing what we call in what is called a throwaway society. That many things that we buy 6 months later, we're throwing it away. So now you're minimizing the the corruption and waste. The corruption and waste is a way to start growing out of poverty. But let me also say that there are millionaires that live in mansions that are also in poverty.
Say that again.
There are millionaires living in mansions that are living in poverty. They have square footage that they will never use. And that is a waste. And they need to listen to these kind of conversations. They need to call me, I'll charge them. I can fix them, really, and it will. No, so, okay. Damn, that was good. All right, so that was.
It's not stand up, Luis. It's a panel.
James Carlin, that name came up to me, Carlin. Yeah, right. No, but it's the truth. Outside for the left, you got left, But outside of the left, rich people could be in worse poverty. Believe me, I'm working with a lot of nonverbal kids that have to talk to me through machines. They're happy. They're not in poverty, and they put me in shock every night. And I go home and and I talk to my wife about it, and I cry, and I go home teary-eyed, and it really is an economic, social, philosophical, that hybridity that I spoke to in the beginning. These are beautiful people that are rich. And, so I'll start with that. It's not so much what you want, but you understand needs and wants. And, and go from there. Because prostitution is not only sexual, prostitution is also doing what you don't want to do, but you have to do it in order to support some ridiculous action that you want to brag about, a swimming pool or whatever. Let's stop prostituting our lives away. And since I mentioned that word, and let's legalize prostitution in the sexual contest so that we can get more people into the right avenues of health and healing as we can. Okay? Okay.
I just want to clarify that not all sex workers do it because of some oppressive system.
Absolutely.
Some people have it as their form of artivism and their form of healing justice as well.
That is right, sex work. It's all about that sex work, and thank you for the addition.
Wonderful. So again, thank you so much for the gentleman over there who submitted his question. Your turn, Felix.
Yeah. So how to grow through poverty, right? Hold on to your dreams, right? Whatever vision you got for yourself, whatever dream you got, hold on to it. And don't pawn it away. Like really hold on to it. Like, I had to grow through a lot to get to this point of clarity and maturity to understand that like no one's gonna protect your vision, your dream, but you. And when you allow people to shape it for you, when you allow people to diminish your light, to put you at the framework of whatever vision they have for you, then in that reality that you live in is not your own. So to get out of poverty for me, understand what you have, understand who you are, also understand the limitations of the community and the surroundings and the access that you have to resources, and then just explore outside of the community, explore outside of your neighborhood, explore outside of the city, explore the internet, understand like whatever resource you might need is available through the internet as far as like not access to knowledge in a certain extent. And then also like let's start looking at actually holding spaces and actually calling to action to create like community libraries, community bookstores, community storytelling initiatives, so that people can actually see that like there is vision outside of just being like 5 years old, to actually see someone in their 60s or 70s or 80s still in the community, actually giving back through actually sharing that access to them. It's not about just resources and finances and stuff like that. It's actually having access to someone that can actually impact you in a way that could give you the tools to emancipate yourself and actually create a framework for yourself that is actually rooted in your best interests, your future's interests. And in that regard, like, there's no telling what you can do when you put yourself in a community of people that actually like really, really care about the legacy that they want you to have for yourself, not because it benefits them to be attached to your dream or your vision, but because they honor you as a person independent of whatever they have going on, and that you deserve it just as much as they do and anyone else. And then find that, channel that, hone that, and then respectfully just go out and make it happen. Because again, like no one's gonna save you but yourself. Unfortunately, I learned that it's really kind of hard to say that. Sometimes it really takes hearing that from someone else, that like, that you can wait sometimes for someone to save you, but realistically, like, like your number might be the same. You can still be at the same address. You can still be at the same street, the same house, but people won't save you even though they know you're struggling. And that's the reality. The reality of it is that like, escaping poverty means like you really gotta kind of like sometimes think independent of like even just belonging. You just gotta survive out of spite, just survive out of spite, just to make it through. So you can go back and say, look, like I didn't have, but I made it, and because I have, you have.
Thank you so much, both. And so I have a follow up, and then we also have a question in the chat that I will raise up. So just to further along this concept of growing through poverty, I myself consider myself a first generation born here in the United States, and for me, my definition of growing through poverty, or finally that I made it moment, you're gonna laugh. Okay, so as a kid, I thought it's gonna be when I can buy my mama 2 goats. Okay, and I know that sounds really weird, and there are a lot of animal rights laws here in New York City about having goats. I actually looked it up, but it was this concept of what is that thing that she missed the most from her home setting, that, and then goats are expensive. They're like $12K, by the way. I look, and what it would be like having a piece of home here, having a piece of that authenticity here. So the reason I share that is because I'm some years old, and I realized that that's not gonna be my aha moment. All right, unless we move to the country or something, that's not gonna be my aha moment. And my mom lives in Georgia, and she's still not gonna get no goats over there. So for you both, if you grew through poverty, or if you're currently still experiencing the oppressive system of poverty in different ways, and when we have so many different definitions, so I'm just gonna define it as being low income, right, which is that Merriam-Webster definition, right? What is that aha moment where you're like, I grew through this, I made it to the other side?
That aha moment, and I don't think we can talk about every aha moment. There's a lot of them, but the one that I recall is because I get fired a lot. No, this is serious. And I always have a supervisory role. I mean, I'm on the top of the, I'm close. I'm a step away from being chairman of the board, and not that there already. I just don't tolerate oppression on anybody. and I expose them, and that makes people uncomfortable. But that aha moment for me was when, and this is during the aha moment when I was at Pace College. It was a college then, not a university. And I worked at a bank trying to get my way through school. And for some event, a widely dominated bank, and I got fired because I wouldn't put up with a comment. And I started to realize that this is going to be a picture of my life, because prior to even getting into college, I had so many bully. I was so victimized by being who I was and what I looked like, that I learned early that no one can fire me. All they can do is change my employer. I will not be fired. Technically, that's what Webster says. And the government also has a definition of poverty that tells you how fascist this country is, in the sense that a family of four can't make over $20,000. If they make $20,000 a year, in what life are you talking about? You know, and when they say we're in a recession, how come everybody that I know is in a depression? You know, we're in the same zip code. They're saying recession, with the depression. The vocabulary is different. You got to change the vocabulary. I tell my students, throw away dictionaries. You create your own dictionary, because the dictionaries themselves are oppressive. So my aha moment was when I realized I don't care. I will not stand for it. I will stand up to every black and brown person. That was that was it for me, black and brown person. If you're black, I'll go to battle with you. Let's go, let's go, let's go. My aha movement is keep getting fired, but in the meantime, keep studying so you're always smarter than the person that's hiring you, and have more degrees than they have. Be smarter. Not that degree makes you smarter, but it's a license of sorts. So my aha movement again was, do what you want to me, but I'm coming after you. You know, and you're not gonna fire me. I'll find somebody else that'll pay me. You know, and that's it.
Thank you.
Hi. So my aha moment is realizing that like my emotional intelligence and my capacity to communicate and effectively challenge in a diplomatic way, systems in place, whether that be through my writing or speaking at a rally or speaking on stage or all that stuff. I can do so independent of actually getting paid for it, but also be able to actually hold my own in capacity, like standing in front of people that actually like pay these graduate loans that they're still paying decades later, to actually be able to kind of have the experiences that I've had, to be like, oh my God, like you're this great writer, but it's like, why is it that we are at different places in life? Because my aha moment is that I'm able to actually stand in spaces and be in spaces, regardless of whatever another person's pathway to life to be in that moment might have been, whether that might be an MFA, a doctorate, and all that stuff. I'm still able to hold my own. Not because I'm not saying this to because I feel that I'm on level or better than or anything like that, but I'm saying that the access to language, the equity around that, the economy around language communication actually should be universal. And for me, the aha moment was actually being able to realistically think back about a public official position that I hold, being probably the only non-paid person on that commission, and then actually everyone around me being in an executive directorship role, and then realizing like, wow, like I'm a co-chair, but I'm really being like I'm holding my own against people that actually have like the salaries to do self-care as they need, being able to go on vacations, being able to do like, meals as they wish and all that stuff. But me, I'm struggling through depression, through PTSD, making it on sometimes not even like having a job, like, struggling to just make it through on whatever I had available to me. but I'm still able to be in that space and command the same respect that they actually have, not because of not because of anything other than actually access to the language and communication to be able to convey that effectively behind a microphone. And that's my aha moment. The fact that, the other day I realized when people were talking about my writing in this space and actually looking at it, and me looking at it as for the first time, looking at it, like looking at my writing on a wall and realizing, um, the accessibility to trauma that I've had in my life. No one has that amount of knowledge around that personal lived experience. And my aha moment is around like the dignity of that, the dignity of that, being able to have that conversation. So there's always an aha moment for me, so thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Question from online. How do activists of all intersectionalities raise awareness of poverty when trying to challenge the quote disability community? I ask this because so many disabled or so many nonprofits that focus on disabilities are white centered with money.
Okay. So disability justice looks very different for a lot of different communities. For the framework of this one, I'll even dig deeper into a further demographic that doesn't really get talked about, the facial justice community, the facial difference community, right? So again, there are disabilities that don't get noticed as such because they don't get talked about, they don't get amplified, they don't get media coverage. People with facial differences are usually the villains in stories, right? The scars, the person who burns and such, and a lot of the organizations that do disability work in that realm of visible differences is kind of like white led. So I think I know who asked that question. But thank you for that. But in that regard, like we really need to start actually calling for more representation. Representation across the board, and then also actually uh, amplifying persons that actually fit that demographic of BIPOC self-identification, or however one wants to identify, whether that be in that regard, because race and ethnicity is such a broad topic. It depends on personal interpretation. But again, it goes to the stem, like fund someone directly, right? Like fund the activists and advocates directly, because only then can they actually have the impact that being on like these platforms that other organizations get in front of. It turns out to, like, you can do your own advocacy. You can go to City Hall, book a time slot at City Hall, do a rally. Actually work alongside like-minded people, and also continue to raise awareness around disparities, the lack of equity, and also just straight up call people out. Call people out. Like
My favorite one.
That's why I also framed it in the sense that, like, I'm independent of any organization or anyone who's actually ever platformed me, because at this point in time, like, my number has not changed. My number has I can do professional courtesy and personal courtesy all you want, but at the end of the day, like, I don't throw people away. I don't throw people away. And the disability community shouldn't actually feel like they have to be begging for scraps, nor do they feel like they should be forgotten. And in that regard, like, just command your space, own that, like command, call to action, also call out. No one should feel like they should actually have to pick up crumbs or scraps and all that stuff, because at the end of the day, like, no one should be removing anyone's dignity away, regardless of what your title is or where you come from or whatever your experience is, because at the end of it, no one should be doing that to anyone else, regardless. Like, that's just like, that's I don't have that privilege of sociopathy to be like, no one else deserves anything but me. That's not my framework of life. In that regard, like, we just got to call out culture. So yeah.
Yeah, there are times for calling out and there's times for calling in. And obviously, when it comes to intersectionality of disability and the disability community and, poverty, we can't afford to call in or sometimes and take that extra mile to do the work. Sometimes it does mean calling out. Luis?
No, I agree with everything that's being said, and actually the entire, from the first second till now, we've been covering that topic of issues of dignity and lack of education. It's only lack of education and philosophy that has us even mentioning that there's people that have disabilities. Everybody's got some form of disability. You know, I'm working with autistic kids now. I've never seen so much autism within myself. You know, yeah, I do that too, you know, and I speak like that too. And when we started becoming informed as to what it is to be the other disabled person, we found out that that disability is making us better. That in the sense that we have more of a responsibility. When you ask me, when you ask me to repeat that we were not born to work, then I'll say, what were we born at for? We were born to contribute. We were born to contribute, to understand that we have responsibility to each other. And like James Baldwin says, and said, I really enjoy Black authors and Black intelligence. You know, it's enormous. James Baldwin said, "For all you know, we could be cousins." You know, when we keep going like this, um, there is so much wisdom from those of us that came from being otherized. And that wisdom is precious. My three kids did not come from otherized parents. And they're smart, not more intelligent, not high IQs, nothing of that sort. I just wish the impossible is that they knew, that they understood what I went through, because they never will understand how I got the philosophy that that I received. You can't teach. You don't go to a page. I can't give you a page to look at to let you know what it was to grow up like I had to grow up. And that is missed today. That is not part of the vocabulary of the United States. Not You can't learn that in the United States, which takes us back to the circumference of this entire conference. We should be able to get to the point where we are all otherized. Nobody has a disability. We have a responsibility to each other, and we just love each other. And let it be known that Puerto Rico was the first country in the world to draw up its constitution with the word dignity written in it. 1972, Montana copied part of Puerto Rico's constitution and inserted the word dignity. And what did the United States do? Take our dignity away. We couldn't even show the Puerto Rican flag in the street without being arrested. We couldn't talk Spanish outside. And I could go on forever what happened. And all the women that were forced to sterilization in Puerto Rico. The abuses of our colonized nation. How can kids today born in Westchester or in New York understand what it is to come? If I trace there is no doubt that my blackness comes from being parent of a runaway slave or somebody black here, because I did my DNA. It comes from Morocco, Northern Africa. We are all cousins. What's wrong with us? And believe me, I go home and I cry and I got to take a drink. And this is not easy artistry. This is not easy artistry. But I don't want to do anything else but this.
Thank you. So beautiful note to end on. Oh, wait, no, we have one more question. Yeah, I like the action. Get up, get your steps in. All right, so first name, camera's over here. First name and question.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Kevin. And the question I have is a little bit open-ended. I was very curious about this talk because, the intersection of poverty and how to grow through it has been an interesting journey for myself. I'll just say it that way. Today I'm 28 years old. standing before you. That means I was 20, 21, 22, and so on. And my 20s have been quite the ride. I'll just put it to you very lightly. And today I can look back and think about ways that I'm going to say I could have been complicit in my own poverty. I tell people sometimes, make the joke that like it's one thing for racism, like the white man or whoever to do it to us, but it's another for us to also be complicit. So when I look back and I think about my choices, I'm like, I could have, they could have made a different choice there, right? Like I could have made a different choice here. I could have, like, I know better, right? I identify with the whole thing about, your lineage. I don't know if Simon Bolivar is in my lineage specifically, but I do know that I come from hardworking people who come from the literal earth, who work with their hands, who are known to have mano dura, who are known to have iron hands, I like to call them, because of that type of work, right? My grandmother, for example, one of my pride and joys, I will say that my grandmother, who's still alive at 92 years old today, her skin is very soft, like lotion, she's had a long time to perfect the skincare routine. So you can imagine, the skin is very, very soft. But if she smacks you even a little bit, it's like cement, right? You know what I'm saying? So I connect with that very much. And now, when I do certain types of work, I can feel my hands like hardening. And at first it made me self-conscious, but then over time I'm like, this is what it's like, right? The purpose of like to get back to connect and the whole thing. So bringing home, my dad has chickens up in Westchester, by the way. So we didn't really look into laws. My dad was like, those are chickens. They remind me of home. Let's go. Yeah, they are. In fact, I did learn that, but my dad wasn't worried about that though. I was. So, it's a lot of things that make this beautiful cacophony of who we are. And the crux of my question is this. Today, I can look back and I can connect to myself and look at all those things and say, I could have made better choices. But in that moment when I needed to make a better choice, in the moment that I was sort of stuck between deciding to be, have that moment an opportunity to have growth and to do something different versus, let's say, doing a bad habit, right? In my community, especially in the low income, we're going to say, the low income Latino community, and even in my own family, and even for myself, I'll be honest, it's much easier to go to the store and spend $20 like on a pack of beer than to like say put some money in my retirement or my healthcare or go to the doctor when I'm sick. And that's not an accident. So when we're in those moments, when we're in those moments where it becomes really critical to connect to that resilience, but we can't. In that moment that we need to connect to, that deeper purpose, but we have, for example, we just have the whiskey or whatever in front of us, and it's easier to make the wrong choice. It's easier to fall sort of deeper into it rather than to connect with the resistance. I know it's a deep question, but I have the sense that we can handle it. So I guess that would be my question. Like, how do we connect to that resilience? How do we bring ourselves back? How do we ground ourselves? How do we metaphorically put down like the liquor bottle and pick up like the struggle? Pick up freedom, liberation. I'm sure Luis has a thing or two to say about that.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So real quick, so I've got 19 years abstinence from drugs and alcohol. I don't smoke anything of any sort either. So in that regard, like I just that's just my personal avenue. So I've always wanted to kind of hold the credibility of actually whenever I'm speaking, to be assured that I'm safe, sane, and sober, just because of the institutional settings that I've been in, and in that regard, I feel that collectively black and brown communities need to actually start working on trying to spotlight financial literacy, also like anger management, emotional intelligence, and actually creating like curriculum around this to actually influence the school systems to actually implement, and also even like BIPOC trauma informed perspective of nonviolent communication. I think that collectively we as a community need to start actually calling on our own communities to actually create what we don't have right now. Like mental health professionals that actually are not just doing it for a paycheck. Actually, we need to have more avenues to get people tested for neurodivergence as children and as adults in the black and brown communities. We need to have like literacy actually like reading programs, literacy programs around that, and also just even more socially responsible, like retail outlets in our communities. Like again, like it comes down to like what do we have in the poorest of communities is always like access. Like why should there be access to a beer and liquor like and everything 24 hours a day at the deli, right? Like how many delis within the block, and so forth. Like how do like 3 or 4 delis in the span of a block actually stay in business? Like, we actually have to start creating like accountability around like how cash economies impact people generationally. Where the taxpayer dollars aren't actually being funneled from there except from like the actual retail outlets. And then if we're not actually paying taxes, then how can things change and we can call on change and actually get involved in like community boards, get involved in like doing initiatives around the communities that actually like-minded persons that actually have values in alignment with you, that are actually healthy values, not just clout grabs, cash grabs, and such like that. Actually, like from the ground up, actually try to figure out who represents the vision that you want for yourself and those around you. And in that regard, like if you don't see it, then be it. I hope that in the span of 5 years or so, I'll have things lined up where I can afford to run for office and do so of my own money without actually calling on like in that regard, like be the change that you want to see because it is possible. It is possible. We have a former president who was obviously impacted by some significant stressors in life, mental health challenges, and we have a city council member who was formerly incarcerated. We have actually two city council members, or assembly member and city council member. I'm sorry, I'm kind of lapsing, but again, like people who are from these communities help them, support them, help them gain leverage, political power, that have healthy values that are in alignment with community safety and actually like transitioning people from poverty into like social mobility.
My response to that goes back to emancipate yourself. That it is connect the dots, intersectionality. Don't allow. I don't want to start with the negative. Understand who we are first. We are human. We're supposed to make mistakes. The original sin, metaphorically, not religiously, is real. We have ruined this planet, and it's getting worse. We participate in the ice that's melting in the Antarctic. We are part of that. We are human. We make mistakes, and that original sin, we're paying for it dearly. Dearly. No civilized country in the world has more people incarcerated than the United States. No, United States didn't even come close to the top 20 countries in the world with good education. Emancipate yourself. We are human. We will take that drink once in a while, or should take it once in a while. When you're emancipated, it will be rarely that you allow an object, something that's liquid, to ruin your life. And what's missing in your life without deep therapy, and I have my issue with social work as far as being too clinical and too European, is that you need to find something or someone you would die for. That is not a horrible goal. When you have something that you would die for, you're lucky. Because you have somebody that you love, or something that you love more than yourself. You're not narcissistic. I personally, to personalize this, I love a handful of people so much more than myself. As a matter of fact, I would die for anybody that's being taken advantage of. You don't think I know what could happen to me when I interfere with an event? I know what could happen to me, but I'm still here. And I could sleep at night. On the micro level, I have a wife, 3 kids.
Shout out
I have
to the wife
kids.
here.
¿Cómo?
Shout out to wifey who's here.
Yeah. But telling you how hard it is to live with me, I also had 2 prior wives. You know? No. No, but I'm real, and I love them, and I took them I cared for them. When I said till death do it part, that's the truth. I was with them. We have dinner together. We enjoy them. We have the kids together. It's the truth. When I said till death do us part, I meant it. Because, however, it's hard to keep up to me because I do what I do. You know. So,
Bring it back, Luis. Bring it back.
But I'm bringing it back. Is you've got to have people that you love and that you would die for. But because I am how I am, and you know me already, I don't know about retirement or relaxing or this. I can't do anything but what I'm doing. You know, so yeah, find somebody you would die for, somebody that you love. And love, when you love, is love forever. Okay? You know, this marriage thing is Eurocentric, okay? You know, if you're married, I'm responsible for those kids, you know? I don't need, what do you pay? You gotta pay alimony? Got alimony, I give them my life, you know? Nobody asked me to pay alimony because, how do you pay alimony? Whatever I got is yours, you know? So, you know what I mean? Just love to death. Eso es todo.
Thank you so much. So, a round of applause for the panelists. The authenticity, the perspective, the encouragement, the motivation, it was all visible today. And so what I'd like to leave you all with, and I actually hope that you utilize the extra time to just go around, look at some of the art in the space, and do some of that unpacking and learning that Luis, mentioned earlier in the discussion. The thing I'd like to leave you all today with is what is your definition of poverty? What is that system that keeps you impoverished? What is the art that brings you that love that you would die for, that joy, the art, the movement? What moves you? And then how can you grow through it? Can you leverage art and artivism to grow through and emancipate yourself from that system of oppression that has you feeling impoverished? That is the question for you to answer on your own. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. I will say... Thank you. If you want to follow any of the panelists, for Luis, you can follow him on his email, justiceunplugged@gmail.com. You can follow some of his words of wisdom by reading any of his books. One of them is from 2011, An Other's Mind. And recently in 2020, we have Justice Unplugged. So feel free to follow him and his thought process. We also have a website here that's justiceforothers.com. And as for my colleague here, Felix Guzman, Felix wants to share his email, Felix Guzman, so Guzman 80